Hello, attendees. Thank you guys for coming on in. We're going to get started in just a couple minutes, but I just want to let everyone in. So it's exciting to see you. We're going to be starting on cashing in on clean energy, how you can save money and save the planet. Today is a very special town hall because it has folks from Washington Conservation Action, the League of Conservation Voters in Oregon, and California environmental voters. So I am so excited to see people pouring in from across the West Coast, or the best coast, as we like to say. So yeah, let's all get settled and get ready to learn about this. I'm going to make sure that it's a lot of fun for everyone. Have gotten some questions submitted ahead of time, but if you have questions at any time, please make sure to use the Q&A function. We're going to try to get through as many questions as possible. And so if your question is selected, then we'll ask it. If not, don't worry. We'll make sure to send that on to our experts and get you an answer sometime afterwards. This meeting is being recorded that way so other folks who were not able to attend tonight are able to look back on this. Sorry you won't be able to ask a question, but one of your League of Conservation Voters groups will be able to get back to you if you signed up through them. Ask them the question you have. That's what we're here for. Alrighty, you guys, it's so exciting. There are like nearly 90 people in this room right now. Already have questions. This Zoom is actually super appropriate for folks that are living in Oregon, Washington, and California. There's a lot to talk about. And so actually, if you guys are okay with it, let's get started. So, hi everyone, my name is Erin McCall, and I'm from California Environmental Voters. I am from California, and most specifically, I live in the Tongva area, Costa Mesa, but Tongva land. And so I wanted to turn it over to my really good friend, Joy, to lead us in our land acknowledgement.
Hello, everyone. My name is Joy Stanford. I'm the political director here at Washington Conservation Action. We'd like to do a land acknowledgement. Washington Conservation Action, based in Seattle, Washington, acknowledges the Coast Salish peoples of this land, the land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Duwamish, Puyallup, Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. We believe more than acknowledgements, we need action. That's why we're helping lead Native Vote Washington and have created a first ever tribal nations program to shift how WCA and conservation efforts across the state work with tribes in Washington in order to recognize and uphold tribal sovereignty in our work. We invite you to find out what lands you are on by clicking this link, native-land.ca. You can find what native lands that you are currently on. Thank you.
Alrighty, that's so exciting. Thank you very much. So I know that I'm on Tongva land, and I'm very blessed and excited to be there. I wanted to start off the town hall by sharing a message from some friends who weren't able to make it, but you should know them.
Hello, I'm Tina Kotek, Governor of the great state of Oregon, and I'm so excited to welcome you all to this Clean Energy webinar. As you know, the Biden administration's Inflation Reduction Act dedicated historic investments to propel more action to fight climate change across our states. Here in Oregon, we're working hard to meet our climate goals. And I like the progress I'm seeing, but it's not enough. We have an opportunity with the Inflation Reduction Act to set the next phase of work into motion. With the National Affordable Clean Energy Plan, we will have the opportunity to put money back into the pockets of everyday Oregonians and Americans across the country. And with the continuing rise in the cost of electric bills, gasoline, and groceries, the delivery of these investments is critical to alleviate stress on working people and families everywhere. We now have an unprecedented chance to increase and expand access to opportunities like rooftop solar, climate-smart agriculture, energy-efficient appliances and upgrades, and so much more. This is truly a milestone worth celebrating. I want to thank the Oregon League of Conservation Voters and their partners in Washington and California for all their hard work in organizing this webinar to ensure that everyone is alerted to opportunities to decrease electric bills, create good-paying jobs, and make the necessary transition to clean energy in an affordable and accessible way. Let's get to work, and thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Hello, I am California's Lieutenant Governor Eleni Kounalakis. I'm thrilled to join all of you for this exciting town hall on the historic opportunity for climate action made possible by the Federal Inflation Reduction Act. Under the Biden-Harris administration, the federal government has passed the most consequential climate legislation in decades. The transformational investments in infrastructure, clean energy, and environmental justice have us poised to slash emissions and transition our economy to a more sustainable future. Here in California, we are excited to have a true partner in President Biden and Vice President Harris and have the opportunity to take advantage of these historic investments. California has long been a leader in the fight against climate change, the most pressing and existential challenge of our time. Our commitment to ensure a healthy environment for the people of today and tomorrow is unwavering. Our commitment to climate action goes back decades and has been championed by leaders from both parties. We've set ambitious targets, including carbon neutrality by 2045, 100% clean energy by 2045. Last year, we said we needed to go faster and passed a law requiring 90% clean energy by 2035. We've also set ambitious goals for offshore wind, 2 to 5 gigawatts by 2030 and 25 gigawatts by 2045. And California is leading the clean transportation revolution. Under Governor Newsom's leadership, we are set to phase out polluting gas-powered vehicles. By 2035, all new passenger vehicles sold in California must be zero-emission vehicles. And we're set to fully transition medium and heavy-duty trucks to zero-emission by 2045. We are proud of our work in California, but we know there is even more we can accomplish together. Climate change is a global problem that demands global action. Here, along the west coast of the United States, we can set the example for the rest of the country and the world of what successful climate policies and actions look like. Thank you to all the organizers of today's town hall, including California Environmental Voters, the League of Conservation Voters, Oregon League of Conservation Voters, and Washington Conservation Action. And thank you to everyone who tuned in for this virtual town hall. What we are doing together is so important. The dollars unlocked by the federal government won't mean much if implementation is slow. Passing the Inflation Reduction Act, as well as the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the CHIPS Act, were historic moments, but that is just the beginning. It now falls on us at the state and local levels to take advantage of these funding opportunities. Let's seize this moment and put those dollars to work for a better, cleaner future for all our people. Thank you.
Hello, climate champions. Hey, I'm so proud of the West Coast leadership on climate action. We're on the cutting edge in the West Coast. We're proving what's possible in building a clean energy economy. Our leadership helped lay a foundation for the infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act. And I want to thank President Biden, who really pulled off a miracle by passing these once-in-a-generation laws. The IRA invests billions in clean energy generation and storage. It puts more EVs on the road. It helps Americans fix up their homes for efficiency and comfort. It's a big jump forward. But our climate strategy goes beyond reducing emissions. We're mobilizing every part of our economy in the net zero transition. And we're saving the planet, and we're creating new jobs at the same time. That's pretty good work. In every corner of our state, we're doing that. We have America's leading solar manufacturer in Bellingham, solar farms in Yakima, a potential hydrogen hub in Tacoma and Southwest Washington, battery manufacturers in Moses Lake, the world's first battery and hydrogen-powered airplanes, fusion energy in Everett, electric bus manufacturing in Ferndale. Man, we are rocking at Washington State, and we're setting up the West Coast to lead the country. This is just the beginning. Every one of you here today has a role in this revolution. You fought for these laws, and now you can benefit from them and help your friends do the same. You really are an ambassador for a clean future. So I want to thank you for what you've done. You're some of my best friends because you're helping my 6 grandchildren to have an opportunity to have a planet to live on. So congratulations. Let's go build a clean energy economy.
All right, that is amazing. So hello to all my clean energy ambassadors. Thank you so much for watching that really great welcome from our governors and lieutenant governor. So tonight we're going to kick off our presentation, and that's going to be by having some experts in the field. I would like to first introduce you to them, and then we'll go through their presentation. So I want to introduce you to Matthew Davis. Everyone, let's say hi to Matthew Davis. I want to also say hello to Lachelle Johnson. Hello, Lachelle, good to see you. And then also Amanda Sachs. Hello, Amanda. So these 3 folks are our Clean Energy and Inflation Reduction Act experts. They're each going to give a quick presentation on different components of this and how we can get involved and actually get money to be able to do great projects in our communities and our homes. And then we'll open it up for question and answer. So first, we're going to start with Matthew Davis. Hey, Matt.
Thanks so much, Aaron. And thank you to our great partners on the West Coast for setting up this fantastic webinar. Really looking forward to getting into it and talking through some of these great investments that passed through Congress and President Biden signed last year. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and walk through a couple of slides here so that you get to learn a little bit more about the Inflation Reduction Act, which we now refer to as the Affordable Clean Energy Plan. Turns out the Inflation Reduction Act isn't necessarily the best name in the world. It's what we needed at the time, but we're generally referring to it as the Clean Energy Plan. So if you hear me say Clean Energy Plan, that's what I'm talking about. So, there's a lot in the Affordable Clean Energy Plan that President Biden signed last year. Millions of new jobs, nearly 1 million new jobs every year over the next 10 years, hundreds of billions of dollars of investments. Original estimates were around $370 billion. More recent estimate was closer to like $460 billion. And those incentives, those jobs will mean energy savings for communities and families across the country. So let me move us through. Here we go. Okay, so variety of different pieces in the Clean Energy Plan. Very big historic investment, biggest in our country, probably maybe biggest in the world, and hits upon a variety of different pieces. All of these things are very important for doing what we want to do, which is stave off the worst of climate change at the very least, and to develop in a way that's going to help our communities and protect our environment and provide healthier communities for our children and our grandchildren. Here's a quick summary of some of the benefits. It's estimated that the investments in the Clean Energy Plan will get us to about 40% reduction in climate pollution from 2005 levels to 2030. We need to go further so that we get to about half, about 50% emissions reductions by 2030. This will get us a lot of the way there, and we need regulatory action from the federal government and great action from leadership states like the states on the West Coast to help us get the rest of the way there. This little table is taken from a report about job creation. This is where that estimate of approximately 1 million new jobs every year comes from. And one of the things that I think is very, very critical about this this legislation is that the investments, 40% of the investments have to go to disadvantaged communities, environmental justice communities, communities that have been left behind previously. And so that is very, very, very important, big piece of this, the importance and the historic nature of this bill. So here's just a graph of our emissions trajectory. You can see if we didn't pass this bill, we would not be in good shape. With this bill, we're getting a lot closer to where we need to be, and we need to bend that curve further down to hit about 50% by 2030. I'm going to walk through a few of the big overarching sections of investments in the bill. Clean energy. Much of the value from the bill comes from clean energy. Tax incentives is one of the big pieces. That's for your, if you want to put solar panels on your roof, 30% tax incentive right there that you get back when you file your taxes. Also applies to commercial development, commercial clean energy development, 30% investment tax incentive for them as well. If you're locating those larger installations in energy communities, communities that have formerly been reliant on fossil fuel energy and fossil fuel energy jobs, or if you're in a low income community, or if you're building it with domestic content, there are 10% adders for each of those things. So if you're doing a commercial development and it's in a place where there was a coal plant that shut down, or where there's a lot of fossil fuel industry and a lot of unemployment, you could be seeing up to 50% tax incentives for building that that solar farm or wind farm or what have you. And I'd also want to mention the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is not rolling out quite yet, but will be soon. And this will catalyze a lot of private investments, especially in disadvantaged communities. A lot of good transportation incentives as well. Up to $7,500 on new electric vehicles, $4,000 for used electric vehicles if you meet certain income requirements. And there is also for commercial heavy duty vehicles, 30% tax incentive, which will really help get cleaner trucks and buses on the road. Healthy communities, the Environmental Justice and Climate Justice Block Grant Program has $3 billion. That is a major, massive, huge infusion of funding into communities that have been disadvantaged and disproportionately exposed to environmental toxins. Very, very important program, and something that we're fighting hard to defend against Republican attacks. I wanted to show this map. This comes from the Blue Green Alliance. They put together a map where you can see overlays of communities where pieces of this funding will be targeted, and or where those bonus tax incentives that I mentioned would come from. So if you're up in Washington State and you're in either Whatcom County or Skagit County up near the border with Canada, you'll see those counties are blue. Those are places that have high fossil fuel economy and high unemployment. And so they would qualify for an additional 10% if you located a wind farm or a solar farm in those counties. There are also, you'll see some of similarly colored down in near Sacramento, in Yuba County. And then there are also in green here, communities that have had coal plants or coal mines shut, and the surrounding communities, those are considered energy communities as well. And again, would be eligible for that 10% bonus. It's a fun little map. Take a look, see what your community is doing, especially if you're on your, county supervisors, or you're working on renewable energy development in the region. There's a lot of incentives for clean manufacturing. This is one of the places where the original estimate for tax incentives has gone up quite a bit from last time, from last year when the bill passed to more recently. This is, I think, critical and one of the biggest drivers also of jobs. We are doing our best to reshore and onshore those supply chains, whether it's in wind, whether it's in solar, whether it's in batteries. And that renaissance of clean energy manufacturing is one of the things that the governor mentioned, talking about solar manufacturing in his state in Washington. That is just one piece of this overarching clean energy manufacturing renaissance here in the U.S. That's really exciting. There's also quite a bit of incentive for more efficient buildings, both affordable housing and also commercial buildings and other building improvements. Agriculture and public lands also did not miss out on the action. There's about $5 billion in forestry and wildfire prevention, investments in coastal restoration, $3 billion there. And then also increasing fees and royalties so that we're getting a little bit closer to a fair share from oil and gas companies using our public lands and extracting on our public lands. Sorry. Okay, so why? That's a little overview. Why would you take action? What are the benefits you could expect from doing things like installing a heat pump, putting solar panels on your roof, getting an EV, cleaner air, saves you money, makes your house more comfortable. You get new appliances. They probably will last longer than an old appliance. And then you're also looking at cleaner indoor air as well as outdoor air and helping fight climate change. Just a little bit about tax credits versus rebates. There are a variety of tax credits in this in the bill, in the clean energy plan. Most of them, but not all of them, only apply if you have tax balances. Some of them are refundable, however, and for the first time ever, NGOs, nonprofits, municipal utilities, rural co-ops, all of those entities will now be able to take advantage of those tax incentives for clean energy. So say your church wants to put solar panels on their roof, and your church is a nonprofit entity, probably a 501c3 organization, that entity will be able to get 30% tax incentive back from the federal government for that installation. And that is something that hadn't previously been able to happen directly like that in years past. And then rebates are in this bill primarily income limited. So you have to meet certain requirements in order to get rebates. And those rebates have not, especially on heat pumps, and we'll hear more from Rewiring America from Amanda, my colleague there, to talk how that works. But those programs are going to be run by the states, and they have not rolled out yet. So primarily the rebates are not running, but those are usually point of sale or point of contract signature when you're looking to install a heat pump, or if you're buying a new car or a used car. The tax incentives for EVs will eventually sort of morph into rebates at most dealerships. And then I mentioned eligibility. The rebate projects will be based on median income, and this gives you a little bit of a sense of where those will be based on an area income, median income of $112,000. For electric vehicles, there's a decently complicated set of eligibility requirements. This tells you a bit about what it is in terms of income requirements and also price tag of the electric vehicle. And then in terms of how much tax incentives you might receive from those vehicles, fueleconomy.gov has it all. They have the up-to-date list. Manufacturers will be providing them updates about which vehicles qualify. That's the place to go if you're looking for a new vehicle. And I think I have one more slide here. There was a question in the Q&A already about, should we be worried about these incentives being pulled away by Republicans fighting over the debt ceiling? This is certainly a threat. It's a threat that we and our state affiliates all across the country are fighting. House Republicans have already voted to eliminate almost all of the tax incentives, all of the incentives, not just tax incentives, almost everything in the Inflation Reduction Act. We are asking people to take action by texting default to 877-877 to tell your representatives to either stand strong and pass a clean debt bill, or if they're Republican and they've already voted for a not clean debt ceiling increase, you might tell them what you feel about that, how you feel about that, and ask them to reconsider. And we will see these attacks continue through the appropriations process and through the Farm Bill negotiations. And groups like ours are working together to maintain these incentives. And I see no reason why we would fail. But certainly there are attempts to pull back on this climate action, which is really too bad. Okay, with that, I am going to pass it along.
All right, excellent. And for sure, we're not going to fail so long as we have all of your help. You guys are the influencers, so we're really hoping that not only can we answer your questions, but that you can go into your community and speak to other folks that are your friends, family, and your leaders to make sure that we do everything that we need in order to enact this clean energy plan. The next person that we're going to bring to talk about equity is my good friend, Lachelle. Lachelle.
Hello, Erin. I love being called your good friend.
It's because you are. You're fantastic.
Awesome. Well, I will also share my screen for y'all. Hopefully you can see it. So what I want to spend some time talking to y'all about today is how the Affordable Clean Energy Plan is actually going to show up in your communities, which is to say, what are the tangible changes that you can expect to see? Matthew talked about some of them up at the top, but just kind of hammering home why it's so important that we protect these investments, because they are going to the people who need them the most. But to preface, I want to lay a little bit of a foundation and talk about the Justice 40 initiative, which is, you might have heard Matthew mention it, at the very top, 40% of investments getting to quote disadvantaged communities. So I want to dig in a little there and give you some context. So in January of 2021, an executive order was issued called Tackling the Climate Crisis at Home and Abroad. This executive order established the White House Office of Domestic Climate Policy, the Civilian Climate Corps, the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, or WEJAC, and then it established a number of other initiatives, including Justice 40. So the Justice 40 initiative itself is a whole of government effort to ensure that federal agencies work with states and communities to deliver at least 40% of the overall benefits from relevant federal investments to disadvantaged communities. As you can see, the investments are along 7 areas. So climate change, clean energy, clean transportation, affordable housing, workforce development, remediation of legacy pollution, and clean water. The initiative aims to begin redressing some of the high levels of pollution, chronic disinvestment, and lack of access to capital in communities of color, low-income areas, acknowledging the fact that disproportionate pollution, disinvestment, and lack of access to capital has been driven by discriminatory environmental, housing, infrastructure, and economic policies. The way that this is meant to happen is through both direct and indirect investments and program outcomes. The goal being that not only the amount of money that's getting to communities is counted, but also the concentration of benefits, right? So if air pollution is reduced by 80% through federal programs, those benefits can't only be concentrated in white, wealthy population centers. 40% of those benefits of that air pollution reduction need to be seen in disadvantaged communities. And I do want to take a second here to note quickly that the term disadvantaged communities is what the federal government uses to describe frontline, fence line, indigenous, and BIPOC communities. So that's why you see the language here. It is not the way that community is self-identifying and isn't otherwise how I would identify community. So I wanted to make that note, but I think it's important that everyone understands the language that you will encounter when you are working through these programs. So now that we have that as a baseline, Matthew talked about it a little bit, but I'm sure you're wondering, like, what is this going to look like? What are the benefits that you're going to see? What are the changes you might see when you leave your house every day, or when you walk down the street? The one that immediately comes to mind for me is increased access to clean water, or the remediation of water infrastructure. Where I live in DC, they're constantly tearing up the street next to my house to replace pipes. So, a minor inconvenience to have better pipes and clean drinking water. But that's the number one tangible way that I see change happening outside of my window. And it might be one of the ways that you see change happening outside of yours. You'll also start seeing buildings, community and government buildings, but also apartment complexes and affordable housing getting upgrades. So increasing energy efficiency or getting weatherized, like getting new windows and doors or upgraded ventilation. Your landlord might decide that it's time to replace your old crusty appliances and get you an induction burner. We can dream. You might see government buildings or parking garages in schools getting solar panels. You'll definitely start seeing more electric school buses driving down the street, taking kids to school, reducing emissions and air pollution in communities, but also reducing the amount of pollution that your kids and the kids in your life have to be exposed to over their lifetime. And then when you go to your mailbox, you might start seeing lower utility bills. You should start seeing lower utility bills. It might not be immediately obvious why. Part of that is related to the weatherization, right? So the upgrade incentives that are available to you directly can increase your energy efficiency and lower your utility bill. But the other part of that is that the Affordable Clean Energy Plan gives incentives to utilities to switch to renewables, and it lowers the cost of that clean energy technology. So it lowers the cost of a utility investing in clean energy technology, in wind and solar. That means that they get cost savings, and those need to be passed on to us, the ratepayers. Some places like New Jersey have assurances that savings go to ratepayers, but we need to make sure that's happening across the board, and that fossil fuel companies aren't just hoarding savings to inflate their profits, as we see frequently. So the last thing that I want to spend some time on is, how do you advocate for your community? What can you do now? I know some of these benefits might seem maybe a little far off, and you might be wondering, what are ways that you can get involved, and where can you get more information and access for yourself in your communities? The first program that I want to bring your attention to is the EPA Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers, or TICTECs. These are 17 organizations and their partners. I think it's 160 partners that they have. They were selected to receive at least $10 million each to provide direct technical assistance, training, capacity building support to EJ communities, to environmental justice communities, and energy communities. The organizations are broken up by EPA region. The West Coast is in EPA regions 9 and 10. So the organizations that are tasked with doing this important work here are the University of Washington, the Willamette Partnership, and San Diego State University. Obviously, they're still working on getting this entire ecosystem stood up because they were announced in April, but they're going to be vital resources for community throughout the implementation of the Affordable Clean Energy Plan. So what these centers and their regional partners are going to do is they'll provide training and other assistance to build grassroots capacity, the capacity of tribal governments to navigate grant application systems, to write grant proposals, manage grant funding, provide guidance on community engagement and meeting facilitation. They can also provide translation and interpretation services so that we can expand the access of people whose primary language is not English, so they can participate in the processes that determine the outcomes in their communities. These centers are gonna become vital to really ensuring that we're actually meeting and exceeding that 40% investment benefits goal that is central to Justice 40. The reason I think it's so important for everyone to know all of this information and about these centers is, as many of us here know, we have to advocate for ourselves and our communities, and that starts with knowledge and access. So knowing about and having access to these technical assistance centers means that you can go to them for information. You can send your community leaders there. You can send your community organizations, your faith organizations there, and get more resources in the hands of people who've been doing the real work on the ground for decades and decades. And that means that we can start to see the systemic change in our neighborhoods, right? And then the last thing I want to leave you with, because I always want to leave people with a place that they can go immediately. If you want to learn more about Justice 40, how it affects you, how you can work to ensure the investments are going to the communities that need them most, how you can ensure that they're showing up in your community, how you can advocate for yourself. I, as part of National LCV, sit on a coalition called the Equitable and Just National Climate Platform. Last year, we released a Justice 40 advocacy guide, which has more information about the background of Justice 40, the importance of Justice 40, and what it actually looks like in community. It's up on the website, free to access. It's a great guide and a great resource because it's at advocate level. It's for everyday people trying to advocate for themselves. It's meant to give you the information and the tools that you need to understand the many facets of Justice 40 and how to get involved in this complex federal landscape. There's also a Justice 40 funding finder in the event that you want to get maybe a little bit more in the weeds and find program opportunities for your community. Say, maybe you volunteer at a community nonprofit and you want to know how you can help tap into federal funding, but most of the information out there is way too overwhelming. You can use the funding finder to determine what nonprofits are eligible for and then whittle down the list from there. So the funding finder and that site really give you the tools you need to take the information and run. I'll make sure that that gets sent out to you, but it is adjustclimate.org if you want to just type it in and go have a look, but highly recommend it. And with that, I will pass it back to Erin.
All righty. Thank you so much, Lachelle. The group chat is going wild, by the way. Everyone in California loves you. They're calling you the regent of all of the clean energy. So we love you very much. Yeah, I just wanted to give real quick points before we go to our next speaker. Number one is keep using the Q&A function. We are answering some of the questions, and then as you see the presentation going on, some of those questions are also being answered as we move along, but please keep using the Q&A function. We will be sending links and information after this webinar, and if you're watching the recording, then you will have also gotten those links so that you'll be able to use all of these resources. We really want to empower you to take this back to your communities and have things move forward. I am very thrilled to bring forth one of our next geniuses, Amanda Sachs.
Thanks, Erin. Hi, everybody. It's so great to be with you. My name's Amanda Sachs. I'm a policy analyst with Rewiring America. As all of the previous speakers made really clear, the IRA has created billions of dollars in incentives for electrification and renewables. This is really exciting, but a lot of state and local governments aren't aware of the breadth of resources now available to them or that will become available to them very soon. And they don't have a clear plan to make the most out of these benefits for the most part. And there's opportunities for us and our organizations to help make sure that the IRA is implemented for a maximum impact and equity. So as advocacy groups, as we're learning about all of these benefits and incentives, we want to help build sustainable market demand for electrification and renewables by helping states and localities access these federal resources, show that we want them to get involved and use these to their fullest effect, work through the implementation of programs, and fill funding and policy gaps that the IRA leaves behind. So overall, we can think of the IRA as jumpstarting the electrification movement in two main ways. On the consumer side, you have rebates, tax credits, and low-cost financing. On the supply side, you have tax credits, incentives, financing, and workforce development funding. And the tax credits are available now. I saw a lot of questions in the chat about that. The tax credits are available. They're sort of familiar to contractors. They are retroactive, and they have unlimited funding, which is awesome. Rebates will be available later. DOE is working to give direction to state energy offices to bring these upfront rebates online by the end of 2023 or in 2024. I want to ground this presentation in the fact that states are starting in really different places and will need different things to maximize IRA implementation. But all states are going to need one, implementation infrastructure, so people doing the work, applying for the grants; two, direction to create goals and develop plans to achieve these goals. This includes support in developing strategies for their specific constituents' needs; stakeholder processes and metrics to measure performance; and three, they'll need additional policies and funding to complement IRA. So starting with implementation infrastructure, we want to help states develop IRA implementation strategies and ensure that those strategies include plans for maximizing the use of tax credits. Planning and coordination can help make sure that states and localities apply and implement all of the IRA funding available to them. And we want to push local governments to adopt and enforce building codes as well. There's, I think, $1 billion in funding for just the implementation of adopting the international efficiency codes. We want to ensure that states align and coordinate IRA funding with their existing programs and with future programs, and we can do all of this with our respective engagement and advocacy tactics. I want to emphasize the role of direction in state IRA implementation processes. It's always better to have legislative goals and then plan out the direction in terms of what it'll take to achieve those goals. And I'll give you an example on the other coast where I live in New York. New York State's climate law, the CLCPA, has these ambitious and legally mandated climate and co-pollutant reduction goals. And they a plan to achieve those goals with a scoping plan that was developed as a roadmap to ensure that sector by sector, economy-wide, we're achieving these goals, and we're not guessing, oh, if we do this, we get this kind of emissions reduction. And state and local agencies are required to be in compliance with this law. In the plan, we wanted rapid building electrification, and we wanted the state to emit or reduce reliance on fossil fuels and non-fossil gases. We advocated for this and we won. The more states that create concrete and ambitious goals and a plan to get there, the more it becomes a norm. And on the federal level, there's the climate pollution reduction grants, which I believe Matthew mentioned. And these are important because there's also funding under this program for implementation. So they can use this federal funding in order to implement their own plans. And the grants from EPA will help states develop new plans to reduce pollution and should also include building electrification, which brings rapid and massive emissions reduction. And before I talk about additional policies and fundings that states need to put up to fill the gaps from the IRA and make their states whole, I want to put some obstacles out there. None of them are insurmountable. There are major challenges that need to be addressed. HVAC and electrician workforce shortages, as illustrated by this picture, are a huge obstacle. But the solution is a very popular one. We need more workforce training, more jobs, more thriving local economies. These are all things that we all benefit from and love. So investing in workforce training, in more electrician jobs, and it will ultimately bring us better communities. And in the US, this problem is somewhat between a shortage of 40 and 80,000 electricians right now. So we'll need to see the electrification workforce development begin by the end of 2023 to really leverage the Department of Energy workforce development funding from the IRA. And other issues include funding gaps and policy gaps. There's state and local administrative capacity issues, which I mentioned before, health and safety issues that affect low-income housing stock, and muddle up the process of getting low-income communities building electrification. And there's onerous permitting requirements. These are also very addressable with money and policy. And states need to start putting together a stakeholder process and plan to address these known barriers in program implementation. And they'll need to identify metrics to measure performance through an equity lens and pollution reduction lens. So to summarize what I've spoken about so far, the foundation of effective IRA implementation is having state infrastructure, and this infrastructure refers to people and state offices working to apply for this federal funding, all of these opportunities, and funneling money through new and existing programs for building electrification. The foundation also relies on states passing ambitious goals in legislation and having a direction to reach those goals. We want there to be a vision for this funding that puts disadvantaged communities first, doesn't waste money on false solutions that we know don't exist or don't help, and invests in building electrification technologies like heat pumps and electric appliances. The last piece in this equation is having additional policies and funding. Essentially, we need states and localities to commit to supplementing IRA incentives with policy and funding that makes up for these gaps. And I think best practices might be too strong of a word because it's so early in the process. But I want to highlight two states that are poised to enhance the financial incentives of electrification and renewable energy through passing new legislation that mirrors the federal clean energy tax credits outlined in the IRA. And this goes back to the goal of needing to build sustainable market demand for electrification. It's not just going to take one big federal policy and lots of money to make this happen. We need state policy too. Okay, so Minnesota first. So Minnesota lawmakers reached an agreement on a $2 billion budget bill allocating hundreds of millions of dollars to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The bill includes tax rebates that serve as incentives for adopting solar power systems, electric household appliances, and electric vehicles. It's anticipated that this bill will pass through the state legislature, which is controlled by Democrats, and be signed into law by the governor, who's also a Democrat. This hasn't happened yet, but this is the latest news as of 6 days ago. The Minnesota bill will facilitate the acceleration of private projects, which have the potential to access federal funding, but they also require a small boost to ensure their competitiveness. Minnesota follows in the footsteps of Colorado, where the Democratic Governor Jared Polis signed a series of bills allocating up to $120 million in state tax credits for heat pumps, electric vehicles, and even electric lawn equipment until 2032. Although they're similar to Minnesota, Colorado's set of bills, it focuses more specifically on consumers. One bill sets ambitious targets for greenhouse gas reduction in Colorado, aiming for 100% reduction by 2050, with milestones of 65% by 2035, 80% by 2040, and 90% by 2045. And these benchmarks are very important for accountability purposes. The package also includes tax credits for heat pump technology, offering up to $3,000 for ground source heat pumps, $1,500 for air source heat pumps, and $500 for heat pump water heaters This is available 2024 to 2033. They're not meant to be forever, but they are meant to really jumpstart this electrification process in Colorado. To incentivize EV adoption, these laws enable Colorado residents to take advantage of new state level tax credits. These are not very common state level EV tax credits. The incentives range from $2,000 to $5,000 per EV at the point of sale until 2025, decreasing to $500 in 2028. So there's a downward slope here. And an additional $2,500 credit is offered for EVs priced below $30,000. So this is to make cheaper EVs even more competitive. And these incentives can be combined with federal and utility incentives. The stacking ability in state policy is really important. We don't want to make people choose between a federal incentive or state incentive. We don't want state policy to get in the way of what's happening federally. The package also provides tax credits for geothermal energy projects and production, calculated at 0.3 cents per kilowatt hour, with a maximum credit of $1 million for the tax year. Residents in Minnesota and Colorado who choose to install solar panels, upgrade to energy efficient heat pumps, or purchase new electric vehicles will soon be available to claim credits from both their state and federal government, which is pretty cool if you ask me. So we need each state and locality, if they can, to commit to supplementing IRA incentives and structuring incentives for stronger coverage of the households that aren't covered by IRA incentives. These next few slides are to help illustrate the funding and policy options available to states. These are policies that can help set up states for success, including explicit electrification goals to signal job security and help make electrification related jobs more appealing. States could also develop new workforce development programs or clean heating programs so that homes can easily switch from whatever fossil fuel they're using to efficient electricity, efficient electric heating. So government procurement of technologies is also helpful to aggregate demand and lower the price for constituents. These are some rules and standards that can help tackle electrifying existing and new building stock, easing the path for electrification and disrupting the path for combustion. So states could commit to all electric buildings or building performance standards. These two options signal that there are enough projects for contractors and workers to help build supply. And these are some additional financial mechanisms that can help fill the gaps from the IRA. And Rewiring America is putting together both a state and local policy menu that'll be more of a comprehensive compilation of all these policy and financial options that are available. It has been my pleasure to walk you through this. I hope it was helpful. I hope I can answer your questions, and feel free to reach out to me or visit rewiringamerica.org.
Outstanding. Now, can I get Matt and Lachelle to come back on the screen, please? All right, everyone. So you guys have done such an excellent job putting questions in the Q&A feature. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just ask some of the questions that we have and then leave it up to y'all to answer them as best you can. All right. And if there are more questions, keep using that function. It's working really well so far. If your question doesn't get answered, we'll make sure to forward it on to our panelists and try to get you an answer soon. All right, the first question comes from someone named Charlotte. They're asking, they want to know how retired people can benefit from these programs if they don't get rebates. Instead, it's only tax deductions. So like, how can retired folks who are not filing taxes get on this benefit? I don't know if Matt or Lachelle or Amanda, you guys want to go first. Don't go all at once, though.
I can try. For if folks don't have tax liability, they would not be able to take advantage of tax credits for solar panels, for heat pumps for, new, more efficient windows on your house. But that said, there are rebates that will be offered through state energy offices, and those will be rolling out sort of in the fall winter area time frame, and those will be income limited. So you have to be at a certain percent of your area median income. So in order to be eligible for those rebates, you'd have to meet those income requirements. The tax incentives, the tax credits for putting solar panels on your roof or getting a heat pump, they are not income limited. So you can always take advantage of those if you are filing taxes. So that's just the very briefest of brief. I want to always +1 the Rewiring America calculator on the Clean Energy Plan or Inflation Reduction Act calculator. It helps you with all of the details. You can click through to get more and more detail as you go. It is a super helpful resource. I use it in my personal life and in my professional life. They are fantastic. So anyway, that's why we partner with Amanda and had her on, among other reasons.
All righty. Amanda, you might be able to answer this question. Cheryl was asking, are these rebates live now? Or will they be retroactive? How soon can people start buying their heat pumps, and will it count for their tax rebates?
Yeah, so the rebates can't be applied retroactively, unfortunately, and they're not available yet. They're expected in later this year or next year. Yeah, so unfortunately, if you would install a heat pump or other equipment before then, you won't be able to retroactively apply the rebates once they become available. But tax credits can be applied retroactively, and they are available right now. So if you install a heat pump next year, you can still claim the tax credit. Or if you've already installed one, you can also claim the tax credit.
Excellent, thank you. Lachelle, we have a question from Robin, and Robin was wondering, how are areas of low income or minority communities determined? How does the government go, this is a community of interest, or this one is not?
Yeah, so without being super wonky for super long, the number one way that most governments are going to be doing this is through mapping. So there is a mapping tool called CGES that was developed by CEQ that basically identifies on census tracts where the classified disadvantaged communities are. Those mapping tools, like the federally available mapping tools, are also paired with other mapping tools like EJ Screen that you might have heard of before. The Department of Transportation also has their own mapping tool, but those are used in tandem with state available data. So I think California has available data, and there's probably either your housing, your Department of Housing and Urban Development usually has this information and is the one that will be compiling it. It can also come through other places, but it's a lot of maps. That's the short answer. Most of them are publicly available, and I'm happy to get the links to those so you can click around and see. With CGES specifically, I would encourage you to look, if you know that your community should show up and it doesn't, there is a function where you can basically send in a comment and say, hey, I know that this should be showing up on your map. Here's some locally available data that I have from our Department of Housing and Urban Development. Can you please add this? And they have been really responsive to that sort of information so that you can do a little bit more advocacy for yourself and your communities too.
I love that. Thank you so much. I have a question from Colette. She's asking, how should we be engaging with our leaders to ensure the money comes to our community? What if my area has conservative mayors, supervisors, or leaders? How can my community access these funds?
That's cool. Okay. I didn't want to talk twice. So I think there are a myriad of ways, right? So as you heard from both Amanda and Matthew and myself, not everything has to go through like your local government or your state government, right? A lot of these programs can be attained by nonprofit organizations, as you heard Matthew talk about at the top. So if you like volunteer for a local nonprofit, or you know one that wants access to some of these programs and benefits, I highly encourage you to use maybe the Justice 40 Funding Finder to see what's available, because it doesn't necessarily have to go through state government. I also would encourage you to meet people where they are. And by people, I mean the people that are actually in your community, and figure out in tandem what your priorities are, like what you'd like to see, and then focus your advocacy in that avenue where you know change can happen. I'm happy to talk through that with folks or send more resources out, but there are a lot of avenues that don't necessarily have to go through your government leadership. That can be grassroots from the actual community advocating for itself through those TikToks that I was talking about, the technical assistance centers. They're there to help you advocate for yourself and get access to these programs and funding. So there's lots of opportunity, lots and lots. It's not dire straits, I promise.
Can I say something, Erin?
Yeah, go for it, Joy. The voice of God.
I just want to say, because I want to just put it out there, like, become an activist, fight for what you want. You know, join Washington Conservation Action, Oregon Environmental League, California Environmental Voters. You're joining us. You're joining us in this fight. We need you. We need more people. We have more leverage if there's more of us to talk about this. And so I just encourage people to find out what each league is doing and help us do it. And we'll have all the resources for you.
I love that. That's exactly the right answer. I have a question from Michael. The question is, are there any creative programs or projects that we should be asking our local officials to apply for that, like, you're seeing in other states? So, you know, is another state doing a really cool street program, right? You know, or local park, or like, what are some things that you're seeing in other states or other communities? So you're like, this is really good. And places like Washington, Oregon, and California should try to replicate it.
I'll just say that there's so many programs. I'm struggling to think of one. And we're at Rewiring America, we're working on that policy menu I mentioned. Will be like a really exhaustive list of the most innovative kind of community climate projects and approaches for policy and financing.
Cool. Matthew or Alicia, have you seen any projects in your work so far, like from New York or something?
Oh, I'm a giant nerd. I love grid infrastructure, and Idaho is doing an incredible job at getting grid infrastructure upgraded and making sure that people have access to like electric vehicle charging. That's not just along like highway corridors and where like there's pockets of industry. Like, they're doing just an incredible job of that. It's probably not the most like glamorous thing to talk about, but I love grid infrastructure, and it's so important to the foundation of us being able to do just everything that we need to do throughout the day, like turn on the lights and be on a Zoom call. So yeah, love it. Grid infrastructure work is the best, and Idaho's doing an incredible job with that.
I love that. We have a question from Sydney actually about electrification in that way. Do we know what electric cars are available for the rebates? And will there be any money to put car chargers in our communities?
I can answer that one. The fueleconomy.gov is the best website to go to. It has all the up-to-date information about which vehicles are eligible and for how much of the tax credit. They are updating it I would say daily, basically, whenever they get information from the automakers about which vehicles they believe qualify. So that is the place to go if you're looking for a new electric vehicle to see what's eligible. In terms of the charging infrastructure, there are incentives for charging infrastructure in the bill, up to 30%. And there are requirements on that. Let me make sure I'm saying the right thing here. 30% for hardware and installation, up to $1,000 for a home EV charger, but it's targeted to rural areas. There is also a lot of funding that came through in the infrastructure law, which I sort of lumped together as part of the federal clean energy plan. There are billions of dollars of publicly available EV charging that is being distributed to states through that program as well. So that's another way that there's going to be more availability of charging. Hopefully that answers the question.
I think so, but it actually digs into our next question. And that is really that, can you dig into some of these home retrofitting programs? And do those programs extend to renters or condo owners? Some folks are not, directly like homeowners, they're condo owners, they own mobile homes, or they're renters. Do those programs extend to those folks?
I would say a great option for renters are the portable heat pumps that you can put in your windows. And there'll be more information in 2024 about like exactly which heat pumps qualify for the rebates. But that is, not only is it more affordable, but it's also portable, and you can take it if you end up moving again after the current house you're in.
Got it. And
And
so,
I'll just,
oh yeah,
go
go
ahead.
for it. Oh, no, I was saying like, yeah, any other tips for renters and
for condo owners, for folks who are in a building that, there is sort of shared ownership, right? In terms of if you own your condo, certainly my experience from when I owned a condo, I had full control over sort of what was inside the condo, but I did not have full control over like what the roof looked like, or, what action was being taken collectively for the building. So those tax incentives are available for condo associations, but how you go about it is, of course, a little bit different in terms of certainly the condo I owned, there were certain things that you could and could not do to the outside of the building. So I couldn't have just gone and put solar panels on the part of the roof that was over my part of the building, right? So there's a different process. But in terms of accessing those tax incentives, it's possible to do that. And you would want to talk with someone who's more expert than I on that specific situation, but it can be done.
Got it. And then do we have a list of what brands or products are available for these IRA rebates? So like, is it GE refrigerators? Is it, what kind of stoves? Like, is there a list that's available for folks to be able to use?
I mean, I don't know if you want to take that. I can at least get things started. I think so for most of the appliances, or for many of the appliances, it is broadly, there's broad eligibility. So I at the risk of saying too much, I think almost any heat pump would qualify. I think that there's a efficiency cut point, but it's quite reasonable. And the same goes for heat pump hot water heaters. They're so much more efficient than average, air conditioning and heating units that they all qualify. Induction stoves, similar sort of thing. There's other pieces that other types of appliances and other sort of efficiency efforts that would it does depend on the efficiency. You have to be more attentive to the efficiency level. Those kinds of details are available at the Rewiring America website, where you can go on the calculator and dig into exactly what kinds of things you want to know about which kinds of projects you're looking into.
All right. Any other final thoughts from Amanda, Lachelle, or Matthew?
Just that I hope you will all get involved with your requisite organization, and you will engage with these lovely people, California Environmental Voters, Oregon League of Conservation Voters, Washington Conservation Action. I have the pleasure of working with them all of the time. And they're some of the smartest people and really do care about the work that they do and care about you all. So I hope you will take them up on that and really follow up with them as you're moving into this new landscape where we have a lot of clean energy opportunity.
Thank you.
I would echo that. Getting to work with these folks is such a pleasure, and getting to work on these policies and getting to see the federal government investing at this scale is just, I mean, I hope that my career has other awesome things in it, but I kind of think that this is going to beat anything else I do for the next 10 years. And so it's fantastic that you are all excited about it. We need people to use these tax credits, to use these rebates when they're available. That's the only way we actually reduce emissions. So thank you for taking action in your homes. Thank you for speaking up at your church or at your county or at your local school board and encouraging them also to take advantage of these incentives. It's going to take all of us stepping up our game. I think the governor said it pretty well, stepping up our game in order to meet our goals. So thank you all for taking the first step by being on this webinar tonight.
Thanks.
Amanda?
Yeah, just want to echo that excitement. I really feel it too. It's electrifying. And I think there's an opportunity for anyone who is interested in climate action to join a chapter near you. There's so much going on. There's so much to plug into, and there's a lot of community to be built through all of the possibilities. I would also say just engage with your state energy offices. They're going to be working through IRA implementation, and they're a good middle person between you and the federal government.
Thank you. Joy, did you want to take us home?
I just want to say thank you to Aaron for emceeing, and thank you to our three experts who I have the pleasure of working with. Thank you to all of you for making this even possible. So thank you to all of you. Take us home, Aaron.
All right. With that, I want to thank everyone for coming. We cannot do this without you. It's very important that you go out into your communities, your churches, and you talk to all your friends and your leaders about the importance of this transition and using the funds from this clean energy plan. We hope that we were able to answer a lot of your questions. If your questions were not answered, don't worry, we will get to them, and we'll try to send an email to you. And we'll also be sending all of the links and resources after this webinar. We will be sending the recording when that's available as well. And we would love to have you guys get involved in your local leagues. There is a lot to do, but the thing is that we can do it as long as we do it together. So thank you very much. You guys have a great evening, and I hope to see you as we tackle our clean energy goals. See y'all later.
Bye. Thank you.